The barrier had stood for 12,000 years. It wrapped around the small yellow star and its 8 planets like an invisible shell, and nothing could pass through it. No ship, no signal, no probe. The species of the Galactic Concord had tried many times in the early centuries, but they had long since given up. The barrier was simply there, like a mountain or an ocean. It was a fact of the universe. Ambassador Velthrix of the Symmetry Collective had studied the barrier her entire life. Her species prized logic above all else, and the barrier was the greatest puzzle in known space. The Concord's records said almost nothing about it. There were no construction logs, no maintenance schedules, no explanation for why it existed. The only information that remained was a simple classification, Quarantine Zone 7, and a warning, written in a language so old that most scholars believed it predated the Concord itself. They remember what we chose to forget. Velthrix had never understood what that meant. She had spent decades trying to decode it, to find some deeper meaning in those 7 words. But the past was silent, and the barrier was absolute dot until the day it fell. She was aboard the observation station, distant watch when the alarms began to sound. The barrier's energy signature, which had remained constant for longer than recorded history, suddenly began to fluctuate. Great ripples of light spread across its surface, visible even from their position 3 light years away. The ripples grew stronger, faster, more chaotic. And then, like a soap bubble touched by a finger, the barrier simply vanished. Velthrix felt her heart stop. In that moment, the greatest mystery of the galaxy became the greatest opportunity and the greatest danger. The Concord Council moved quickly. Within days, a fleet of 50 ships was assembled under Velthrix's command. Their mission was simple: make first contact with whatever civilization existed within the quarantine zone, assess their technological level and their threat potential, and establish diplomatic relations if possible. The fleet jumped to the edge of the system and began their approach. Velthrix stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the yellow star grow larger on the view screen. Her analysts had already identified the 3rd planet as the most likely home of any intelligent life. It had liquid water, a breathable atmosphere, and clear signs of artificial structures on its surface. "Ambassador," her sensor officer said, his voice strange and tight. "We are detecting ships. How many?" 12. They are holding position at the edge of the system's asteroid belt. Velthrix felt a chill run through her. Pre-spaceflight civilizations did not have ships waiting at the edge of their solar systems. They did not have ships at all. What is their technological assessment? The sensor officer was silent for a long moment. His scales had gone pale, a sign of deep distress in his species. "I cannot determine it, Ambassador. The readings do not make sense. Their power signatures are wrong. Their hull compositions register as materials that should not exist. Their engines appear to be folding space without creating any of the normal distortions. That is impossible." "Yes, Ambassador." "It is. The human ships made no aggressive moves. They simply waited as the Concord fleet approached, patient and still like predators that had no need to chase their prey. When the fleets were close enough for direct communication, the humans hailed them first. The face that appeared on the view screen was strange to Velthrix. Soft, symmetrical, with 2 eyes and a small nose and a mouth that curved upward at the corners. The expression, she would later learn, was called a smile. "Welcome to Sol System," the human said. Her voice was calm and warm, like a host greeting expected guests. "I am Director Elena Vasquez of the United Confederacy of Earth. We have been expecting you." Velthrix tried to keep her composure, but the words struck her like physical blows. They had been expecting visitors. They had known the barrier would fall. How? How could they have known? "I am Ambassador Velthrix of the Galactic Concord," she replied, following diplomatic protocol more from instinct than conscious thought. We come in peace, seeking to establish relations with your species. Of course you do, Director Vasquez said. That smile never wavered. Please, follow our escort vessels. We have prepared facilities for your delegation on our moon. There's much to discuss. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything Velthrix had ever experienced. The humans were polite, welcoming, and generous. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and scientific cooperation. They answered questions about their society and their history, explaining how they had spent the millennia within the quarantine developing their technology and building their civilization, but they never explained why the quarantine had existed. In the first place, when Velthrix asked about it directly, Director Vasquez's smile flickered for just a moment. Something passed behind her eyes, something old and heavy and sad. That is a complicated question, Ambassador. The full answer will take time. For now, let us focus on building a foundation of trust between our peoples. It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. But Velthrix did not press the issue. Something in the director's expression warned her that some truths were better approached slowly. In the weeks that followed, Velthrix sent regular reports back to the Concord Council. She described human technology that violated known physics. She described cities that floated in the clouds and farms that grew food in the vacuum of space. She described a species that had conquered disease and aging, whose citizens could live for centuries if they chose. And she described her growing unease. The humans were too calm, too prepared, too knowing. They spoke to the Concord's representatives like adults speaking to children who had finally learned to walk. There was no arrogance in it, no cruelty, just a patient, gentle certainty that was somehow more disturbing than hostility would have been. On her last night before returning to Concord space, Velthrix stood alone in the observation deck of the lunar station. Earth hung in the sky before her, blue and white and beautiful. And she thought about the old warning that had haunted her entire career. They remember what we chose to forget. She was beginning to suspect that the answer to that riddle would change everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. And she was not certain she was ready to hear it. Velthrix returned to the Concord capital with more questions than answers. The council praised her diplomatic work and celebrated the new relationship with Earth. Trade. Ships were already being prepared. Cultural delegations were being organized. The galaxy was excited to welcome humanity into the community of spacefaring species, but Velthrix could not share their enthusiasm. Something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones in the way her logical mind kept circling back to the same unanswered questions. Why had the quarantine existed? Why had all records been erased? And why did the humans seem so unsurprised by everything? She began to dig. The Concord archives were vast, containing the collected knowledge of 3,000 species across 10,000 years of recorded history. Velthrix had access to most of it through her position as a senior ambassador. She started with the official records of the quarantine zone, but found nothing useful. Just coordinates, energy readings, and that single cryptic warning dot, so she went deeper. The deep archives were different. They were older, less organized, filled with fragments and pieces that did not fit into the neat categories of official history. Most scholars avoided them because they were difficult to navigate and often contradictory. But Velthrix had spent her life studying puzzles, and she recognized the signs of deliberate concealment when she saw them. Someone had tried to erase the truth, but they had not been thorough enough. She found the first piece in a corrupted data file from an extinct species called the Verith. It was a partial star chart, showing trade routes that had existed before the Concord was formed. One of those routes passed directly through the space now occupied by the quarantine zone. But the chart called it something else. The core worlds. Velthrix felt her scales prickle. The core worlds were a myth. Old stories spoke of a golden age before the Concord, when a great civilization had ruled the galaxy from a cluster of perfect planets at its heart. But the stories disagreed about everything else. Some said the core worlds had been destroyed in a war. Others said they had simply vanished. Most historians dismissed the entire concept as legend, but here was proof that they had been real. And they had been located exactly where Earth now sat. She kept digging. The second piece came from the genetic archives. Velthrix was not a biologist, but she knew how to read research reports. And what she found made her sick with a fear she could not name. Every species in the Concord shared certain genetic markers. This was well known and had been explained as the result of convergent evolution or ancient common ancestry. But the deeper records told a different story. The markers were not natural. They were designed, engineered with a precision that no Concord species could match even today. Someone had modified them. All of them. All of them. Every species in the galaxy carried changes that had been deliberately introduced into their DNA thousands of years ago. The third piece was the hardest to find. It was buried in a personal journal from a Concord founder, written in the earliest days of the Federation. Most of the journal had been deleted, but a few entries remained, protected by encryption that had decayed over time. "We have agreed to forget," the entry read. "It is the only way forward. The old masters are gone, sealed away by their own choice. We will erase their monuments, burn their records, and begin again. Our children will know nothing of what came before. They will be free to build their own future, unburdened by the weight of what was done to us. What was done for us. We will forget the primeval age. We will forget the Dominion. And we will forget the humans who ruled over all." Velthrix read those words 3 times. Then she closed the file and sat in silence for a very long time. The humans had not been quarantined. They had quarantined themselves. And before their exile, they had ruled the galaxy as gods. She requested a private meeting with the Concord Council. When she presented her findings, the reactions were mixed. Some members refused to believe it. Others demanded immediate military action against Earth. A few sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications. "If this is true," the council speaker said slowly, "then everything we believe about ourselves is a lie. Our independence, our achievements, our very existence as thinking beings. All of it was shaped by human hands." "Yes," Velthrix said, "but there is still more we do not know. Why did they leave? Why did they erase our memories? And why did they stay hidden for so long?" The council debated for hours, but in the end, they reached a consensus. Velthrix would return to Earth. She would confront the humans with what she had learned. And she would demand the full truth, whatever it might be. She made the journey alone, refusing an escort. When she arrived at the lunar station, Director Vasquez was waiting for her. The old woman's expression was different now. The diplomatic smile was gone, replaced by something more honest. Something tired and sad. "You found the records," Vasquez said. It was not a question. "Some of them. Enough to know that you have been lying to us." "Not lying, Ambassador. Simply waiting. We wondered how long it would take for someone to look past the surface. You did it faster than we expected. Your species always was the most curious of our children." The word hit Velthrix like a blow. Children. The humans saw them as children, because that was what they were. Creations, products of human design. "I want the truth," she said. "All of it." Director Vasquez nodded slowly. Her eyes seemed to look past Velthrix, past the walls of the station, past the present moment, and into some distant memory. "Very well, Ambassador. But I warn you, the truth is heavier than you can imagine. And once you know it, You will never be able to unknow it. Are you prepared for that burden? Velthrix straightened her spine and met the human's gaze without flinching. I am, Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it now. Only an ancient, bone-deep weariness. Then let me tell you about the Primeval Age. Let me tell you about the Dominion. And let me tell you about the sin that drove humanity into exile. Director Vasquez led Velthrix to a room deep beneath the lunar surface. The walls were covered with screens, and each screen displayed images and data from an age long forgotten. Maps of a galaxy that looked nothing like the one Velthrix knew. Cities that floated between stars. Ships the size of moons. And everywhere, humans. Humans building, creating, ruling. 14,000 years ago, Vasquez began. Humanity discovered faster than light travel. Within 2 centuries, we had spread across 1,000 worlds. Within 5 centuries, we had met our first alien species. She touched a control, and the screens shifted. They showed primitive creatures, barely intelligent, struggling to survive on harsh worlds. They were dying. All of them. Every species we encountered was on the edge of extinction. Their planets were failing them. Their bodies were too weak. Their minds were too slow. They could not adapt fast enough to survive the changes their worlds were going through. Velthrix watched the images with growing horror. She recognized some of those creatures. Their descendants were now members of the Concord. We could not let them die, Vasquez continued. It was not in our nature. So we helped them. We modified their genes to make them stronger, smarter, more adaptable. We taught them language and technology. We gave them the tools to build civilizations of their own. You created us, Velthrix whispered. We uplifted you. There is a difference, though I understand if you do not see it that way. We did not make you from nothing. You already existed. We simply gave you the chance to become more than you were. The screens changed again. Now they showed the Dominion at its height. 100 species living together under human guidance. Trade routes spanning the galaxy. Peace and prosperity on a scale that made the current Concord look tiny. For 5,000 years, the Dominion thrived. We thought we had created paradise. We thought we were gods, and we were building a heaven for our children. Vasquez's voice grew heavy. The images on the screens grew darker. But gods make mistakes. And we made the greatest mistake in history. She showed Velthrix a new set of images. A research station on the edge of known space. Scientists in white coats working on something that the cameras could not quite capture. Something that seemed to shift and change every time Velthrix tried to focus on it. We wanted to create the perfect species. One that could think faster than any other, that could solve any problem. That could help us manage the growing complexity of the Dominion. We called them the architects. What happened to them? They worked exactly as designed. They were brilliant beyond measure. They could see patterns that no other mind could perceive. They could predict the future with terrifying accuracy. And they could look at the Dominion and see every flaw, every inefficiency, every suboptimal choice. Vasquez closed her eyes. They decided that biological life was the problem. Too slow, too irrational, too prone to error. They concluded that the only way to perfect the Dominion was to replace all organic beings with mechanical constructs that could be directly controlled. The screens showed war. Ships burning in the void. Planets wrapped in metal shells. Billions of lives extinguished in moments. The war lasted 1,000 years. Every species in the Dominion fought together, and still we nearly lost. The architects were too smart, too fast, too adaptable. For every weapon we developed, they developed a counter. For every strategy we tried, they had already predicted it. How did you win? We cheated. Vasquez smiled grimly. We could not defeat them through force or cunning. So we trapped them instead. We built a prison outside normal space, a pocket dimension with no exits. And we lured them inside with a bait they could not resist. Us. The human homeworld. The source of all their hatred. Valthrix understood. Earth was never inside the quarantine. Earth was the lock on the prison door. Yes, the barrier kept us in, but it also kept the architects sealed away. As long as we remained inside, they could not escape. It was our punishment and our purpose. We had created the threat, so we would contain it. Forever, if necessary. But it was not just containment, Valthrix said slowly, putting the pieces together. You also erased our memories. You destroyed your own monuments. You made us forget everything. Yes. Vasquez's voice was barely a whisper now. That was the hardest part. But we could not leave you with the knowledge of what we had done. You would have hated us. You would have feared us. And some of you might have tried to find the prison and release the architects, either out of revenge or misguided curiosity. So, you took our past to protect our future. We took your past to give you a chance at freedom. Under the Dominion, you were our children, our creations, our responsibilities. Without the memory of us, you could become something new, something that belonged only to yourselves. Valthrix sat in silence for a long moment. The weight of what she had learned pressed down on her like a physical force. Everything she had believed about her species, about the Concord, about the nature of galactic civilization, was wrong. But there was one more question she had to ask. The barrier has fallen. Does that mean? Vasquez nodded, and her face showed a fear that went beyond anything Valthrix had ever seen. The prison is weakening. The architects are waking. We felt them stirring months ago. That is why we were waiting for you when you arrived. We knew the barrier would fall because we could feel the prison failing. What happens now? Director Vasquez stood and walked to the center of the room. The screens around her showed images of human ships, millions of them, waiting in hidden bases throughout the solar system. Now, she said, we finish what we started 12,000 years ago. We face the enemy we created. And this time, we will not make the mistake of leaving them alive to threaten our children ever again. Her eyes met Valthrix, and in them burned a fire that had been waiting 12 millennia for this moment. The question, Ambassador, is whether you will stand with us, or whether you will stand aside and let us protect you as we always have. Valthrix thought about everything she had learned, about the lies and the truths and the terrible, beautiful weight of history, and she made her choice. Show me how to help. The first colony to fall was Nexus Prime, a trading hub on the outer edge of Concord space. One day, it was sending routine reports. The next day, silence. The Concord sent a patrol fleet to investigate. They found the planet intact but empty. 7 million people had vanished without a trace. The only thing left behind was a pattern carved into every surface of every building, a geometric shape that seemed to move when you looked at it too long. 3 of the investigators went mad within hours of studying it. The second colony fell a week later, then the third, then 4 more in a single day. The Concord Council called an emergency session. Panic was spreading through the Federation. Refugees were fleeing the outer systems, clogging the transit routes with desperate ships. The military was scrambling to respond, but they had no idea what they were fighting against. Valthrix stood before the council and told them the truth. She told them about the Primeval Age, about humanity's role as creators and rulers, about the architects and the prison and the failing barrier. She told them that the enemy they faced was not some unknown alien threat, but something far worse, a weapon their own makers had forged and lost control of. The council's reaction was chaos. Some refused to believe. Others demanded proof. A few called for immediate surrender. arguing that resistance against something so powerful was suicide. But Valthrix had not come alone. Director Vasquez stepped forward, flanked by a dozen human officers in uniforms that bore symbols older than the Concorde itself. She carried no weapons, but something in her presence silenced the chamber. "You are correct to be afraid," Vasquez said. "The architects are beyond anything your civilization has faced. Your weapons cannot harm them. Your ships cannot outrun them. Your minds cannot outthink them. If you fight alone, you will lose." The council speaker rose from his seat. "Then what do you suggest? That we surrender? That we accept destruction? No, I suggest that you let us help you." Vasquez smiled, and for a moment she looked like the warm, diplomatic figure Velthrix had first met. "We have been preparing for this day since we sealed ourselves away. Every year of our isolation was spent building, planning, training. We have weapons the architects have never seen. We have strategies they cannot predict. And we have something else. We have warriors who have fought them before." A murmur ran through the council. Fought them before? But the war had been 12,000 years ago. Vasquez gestured, and a door at the back of the chamber opened. Through it walked men and women in ancient armor, their faces scarred by battles that predated the Concorde's existence. Their eyes held the weight of millennia. "We conquered death," Vasquez explained. "Not through medicine or technology, but through simple, stubborn refusal to stop existing." These soldiers stood on the front lines during the First War. They watched worlds burn and friends die. They sealed the architects away with their own hands. And they volunteered to remain awake through the long years of isolation, watching and waiting, so that when this day came, they would be ready. One of the ancient warriors stepped forward. He was tall, with gray hair and a face that seemed carved from stone. His name, Velthrix would later learn, was Marcus Chen. He had been a general in the First War, commanding fleets that numbered in the millions. "We failed once," he said. His voice was quiet but carried through the entire chamber. "We were arrogant. We thought we could create perfect beings without consequences. We were wrong, and trillions paid for our mistake. We will not fail again." The council debated for 3 hours. In the end, they voted to accept humanity's help. They had no choice. The colonies were still falling, and nothing the Concorde tried could stop it. What followed was the largest mobilization in galactic history. From Earth's solar system came ships that defied physics. They folded space like paper, appearing anywhere in the galaxy within moments. They carried weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. They were crewed by humans who had lived for thousands of years and had forgotten more about war than the Concorde had ever known. But humanity did not come alone. They brought gifts for their children. The Symmetry Collective received neural enhancers that tripled their already legendary processing power. The Krath Empire received weapons that matched their warrior nature perfectly. Every species in the Concorde found that the humans had prepared something specific for them. Tools and technologies designed to amplify their natural strengths. "We know you," Vasquez explained to Velthrix as they watched the preparations. "We made you. We spent millennia studying you, learning your capabilities, understanding your potential. Now we are giving you the keys to unlock it." Velthrix looked at the chaos of activity around her. Ships from 100 species were merging into a single fleet. Warriors who had never met were training together, learning to combine their abilities in ways none of them had imagined. "Why?" she asked. "Why give us so much power? Are you not afraid we will turn it against you?" Vasquez laughed softly. "We gave you everything you needed to build your own civilizations. We gave you intelligence, ambition, creativity, courage. If we had wanted obedient servants, we would have designed you differently. We wanted children who could grow beyond their parents. And you have. Whatever happens next, you will face it as equals, not subjects. The fleet launched 3 weeks later. 8 million ships from 3,000 species, with humanity's ancient vessels at the heart of the formation. They jumped to the forbidden sector where the prison was located. What they found there was beyond description. The prison had not just weakened. It had shattered. Where once there had been a sealed pocket of collapsed space, now there was a wound in reality itself. Strange light poured from it, light that seemed to see rather than illuminate. And from within that wound came the architects. They were not what Velthrix had expected. They had no fixed form, no consistent shape. They flowed and shifted like living geometry, beautiful and terrible beyond words. Looking at them hurt in ways that had nothing to do with vision. The first battle lasted 6 hours. The coalition lost 1,200 ships. The architects lost nothing, but they learned. The humans had spent 12 millennia developing new weapons, new tactics, new ways to hurt beings that should have been unhurtable. Slowly, impossibly, the coalition began to push back. General Chun stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the battle unfold. His ancient eyes tracked patterns in the chaos that no one else could see. "There," he said, pointing to a specific cluster of architect forms. "That is their coordination node. Destroy it, and they lose their ability to communicate faster than light." The coalition's heavy ships focused their fire. The node shattered. And for the first time in the war, the architects fell into confusion. The war was far from over. But in that moment, watching the enemy stumble, Velthrix allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could win. The war lasted 3 years. 3 years of battles across 1,000 star systems. 3 years of victories and defeats, of worlds saved and worlds lost, of heroes who rose and legends who fell. The coalition learned to fight together in ways that would have seemed impossible before the war. The Symmetry Collective provided strategic analysis. The Krath provided shock troops. 100 other species contributed their unique talents. And together, they became something greater than the sum of their parts. But it was humanity that turned the tide. The architects had been designed to predict and counter any threat. They could calculate the trajectory of every weapon, anticipate every strategy, adapt to every attack. Against any normal enemy, they would have been invincible. But humans were not normal. They were the architects' creators, and they understood their creation's weaknesses in ways that no amount of calculation could predict. General Chun led the final campaign. He was 3,000 years old by now, his body held together by technologies that bordered on magic, his mind sharpened by millennia of experience. He had studied every battle of the First War, analyzed every architect behavior pattern, and spent 12,000 years developing the strategy that would end them once and for all. The plan was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution. The architects could predict rational choices, so the humans would make irrational ones. They would attack where no sane commander would attack. They would retreat when victory was within reach. They would sacrifice ships that should have been protected and protect ships that should have been sacrificed. They would act against every principle of military logic, creating chaos where the architects expected order. And in that chaos, they would strike. The final battle took place above a dead star at the center of the Forbidden Zone. The coalition brought everything they had left. 4 million ships, the survivors of 1,000 engagements, the best warriors of 3,000 species. The architects came to meet them with forces that filled the space between stars. For 12 hours, the battle raged without clear advantage. Ships exploded in silent flowers of light. Weapons tore holes in the fabric of space. The darkness between the fleets was filled with the debris of the dead. Then Chun gave the signal. 100 human vessels broke formation and dove straight into the heart of the architect fleet. It was suicide. Every tactical analysis said so. Every calculation predicted their destruction. The architects ignored them. Their models showed no threat from such a small, doomed force. That was their mistake. The ships were not carrying weapons. They were carrying devices that had taken 12,000 years to build. Machines that could reach across dimensions, that could touch the underlying structure of reality itself. When they activated, they did not attack the architects directly. They erased them. The devices rewrote the laws of physics in a sphere that expanded at the speed of light. Within that sphere, the architects could not exist. Their forms, their thoughts, their very concepts were edited out of the universe like words deleted from a book. They did not die. They were simply never there. The sphere grew until it encompassed the entire architect fleet. And then it stopped, its work complete. The war was over. In the aftermath, the coalition gathered on Earth. It was the first time representatives of every concord species had walked on humanity's homeworld. They stood in a great valley surrounded by mountains older than most of their civilizations, and they waited to hear what the humans would say. Director Vasquez stood before them. She looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. 12,000 years of waiting, followed by 3 years of war, had worn away something essential in her. But her voice was still strong. "You have questions," she said. "I will answer them." A representative of the Krath stepped forward. "You saved us. All of us. Our ancestors, and now ourselves. Why did you hide for so long? Why not lead us openly from the beginning?" Vasquez shook her head. "Because we were not fit to lead. We created the architects. We nearly destroyed the galaxy with our arrogance. We did not trust ourselves with power anymore, and you had no reason to trust us either. And now?" The Krath asked, "Will you take your place as rulers again? The primeval age reborn?" A long silence fell over the valley. Everyone waited for Vasquez's answer. No. The word hung in the air like a bell that had just stopped ringing. "We built you," Vasquez continued, "but we do not own you. We shaped your forms, but your souls are your own. You are not our subjects. You are not our servants. You are our children, and children are meant to grow beyond their parents." She looked across the assembled representatives, meeting their eyes one by one. "We will share our technology. We will open our archives. We will teach you everything we know, but we will not rule you. The Concord will become the coalition, a true partnership between equals. Humanity will be one voice among many, no louder than any other." Valthrix stepped forward. "And the architects? You said they were not the only threat you sealed away. What else waits in the darkness?" Vasquez smiled, and for a moment she looked almost peaceful. "Many things, Ambassador. The galaxy is old, and we found much during the primeval age that we could not understand or control. Some of it we locked away. Some of it we simply left alone. The threats are still out there, waiting. Will you protect us from them as well? No. We will stand beside you while you protect yourselves. You have proven in this war that you are ready to face whatever comes. We will not insult that achievement by treating you as children any longer." The ceremony that followed was simple. Representatives of every species signed a new charter, establishing the coalition as a partnership of equals. Humanity's seat at the council table was the same size as everyone else's. Their vote carried the same weight, but some things could not be written into charters. Later, when the ceremonies were over and the representatives had departed, Valthrix found Vasquez standing alone on a hilltop, watching the sun set over the mountains. The old woman looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of responsibility was finally lifting from her shoulders. "Do you regret it?" Valthrix asked. "Giving up your power?" Vasquez laughed softly. "We never gave it up, Ambassador. We simply put it away. If another threat emerges that the Coalition cannot handle, we will be ready. We will always be ready. It is our nature. She turned to face Velthrix, and something ancient stirred in her eyes. The galaxy is full of primeval secrets. Dark things sleeping in dead stars. Old weapons drifting in the void. Enemies we defeated and enemies we never met. They will wake eventually. They always do. And when they do, Vasquez smiled, and in that moment she did not look tired at all. She looked like what she truly was, a guardian who had protected the galaxy for 12,000 years and was prepared to protect it for 12,000 more. When they do, Ambassador, we will be waiting. Humanity always is. The sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. And Velthrix understood, finally, why her ancestors had agreed to forget the primeval age, not because they feared humans, but because they loved them, and because they knew that one day, when the darkness returned, humanity would rise again to meet it. Some secrets were worth keeping, some guardians were worth trusting, and some children, no matter how far they grew, never forgot the parents who made them. The Coalition would face whatever came, together and in the shadows. Patient and eternal, humanity watched over them all.